child, I see you on your knees. Your cross has fallen in the muddy street. It takes all you've got just to keep your feet when your world comes crumbling down. Sick and hungry and on the run. The ward is empty and the quarter's been drawn. There's no telling who's come and gone, and the world's come crumbling down. Could this be a part of the plan? Won't somebody please understand? All you can do is the best you can when your world comes crumbling down.
Welcome back to another episode of Down Addiction Avenue. This is our second part to our first episode, and with me are I'm honored to have with us Stephen Marciano from Brockton, District Attorney Timothy Cruz, and Dr. Dan Muse from Brockton Signet Healthcare. And in our last episode, Peter, we left off where we were talking about your brother Peter's struggles with substance use disorder, and how it started off with sports injuries from his football playing career in college. And the struggles that he went through went over, at our last episode, talked about 25 years. And I know he passed away last year. As a family member going through that, seeing that suffering, what kind of an impact did that have on your family directly, and then any of your, the extended family, were kids involved here?
I think it's a great question, and the impact is it's still going on. My brother Peter was married, had two children, two beautiful children, 7 and 5 years old, that he left behind. And unfortunately, those kids, and fortunately, those kids have a loving, caring family that will support them for the rest of their life. And I'm not even talking, support them with love and whatever they need in life. But the impact of my brother's death was, these kids are going to grow up without a father. My children are going to grow up without their uncle that they loved. And my parents have lost a child, and it's just not supposed to happen that way. And it's had a major impact on our family because of the impact that my brother made on our family. He had a major impact in all of our lives. And so when someone has the type of impact that he had on so many lives, the impact that you leave behind is devastating. And it's devastating. There's, you get angry at him, and you can't believe. But I just think that it shows the power. There's nobody in the world who loved those two children more than my brother Peter. And he, every time that they were together, love in his eyes. And I say it when I go and speak to children. I say that as a parent, you would jump in front of a train for your kids. You would literally get up, and if they said, if you can guarantee your child's will live to be 90 years old, would you jump in front of a train? So you can imagine that any parent alive that is worth their salt would jump in front of a train for their children. This drug is so powerful that my brother Peter couldn't stop doing drugs, and it caused his death, and he left behind two children. So you can imagine how powerful this drug is, which is why I like going out and speaking to kids, because we want to try to prevent that from happening before it gets started.
And that's really that's a powerful statement. And I know District Attorney Cruz, having seen this is a story that you hear far too often, or you see far too often in your role. what are the impacts that you see on the families on a day-to-day, on the day-to-day operations at the DA's office who are affected by this? What do you see?
I think it's analogous to a pebble in a pond. There's a ripple effect to this, as Stephen was saying, how it affects families. What we end up seeing is really a missing generation. We have seen, for the most part, in Plymouth County over the last few years, normally the normal average age of an individual who would be passing would be somewhere between 35 and 40. What we've seen, unfortunately, in the last few years is that age has actually gone down. And what we see happening as a result of that, when someone passes, and like I said, it has that ripple effect. They may be married, they may have a girlfriend, they may have children. All of a sudden, that child does not have a dad, does not have a mom. We deal with all sorts of individuals, and I've spoken to people down in Plymouth regarding a grandparents group, about grandparents who are trying to take over for their grandchildren. These kids that are endangered as a result of the fact that their parents are no longer there, and that our society is not set up to help and transfer that sort of parental role to a grandparent or to an uncle or to an aunt that may be in a position to take over, may be best suited to take over for those kids. It's what's best for those kids. And unfortunately, sometimes there may be somebody else, perhaps a spouse or the mother of the child or the father of a child, who wants those kids and has more rights to take those children, even though they themselves are dealing with the same issue that their loved one whom passed away is dealing with. And our parents and our grandparents are not set up to get resources, because if you are a senior on a limited income, your income's not going to change, but your grandchild, who is a young kid, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, all of a sudden they're living with you, and you need resources to take care of that child. So I think that we, as citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, have to talk to our legislators and have to see whether or not they can help us provide an avenue to help the grandparents, to help the spouses, to help the people who are left behind, who have to deal with the aftermath that Stephen's talking about, that you lose somebody that you love and that love you, and they love you back. But because of what's happened to their body, because of what's happened to their body chemistry, they can't control what they're doing. And they're either going down the path of crime, because we see lots of people who end up, who cannot afford to use prescription meds, go down that road of heroin, which is much cheaper, and they end up with me. They end up in law enforcement. They end up in our jail. The biggest detox we have in Plymouth County is the Plymouth County House of Correction. And that's where you have people who show up there and they have no resources themselves, really, at the outset, and notwithstanding the great job by Sheriff McDonald, who's down there right now, is trying to make sure there are reentry programs, there are ways to help people get off, help them in a variety of ways. But we need to make sure that we stand up for the kids who I refer to them as drug-endangered kids, who right now are in the scope of the risk, and we have a responsibility as a society to stand up for those kids, make sure they're taken care of, and make sure they don't fall into the wrong hands.
And as we're talking, we're painting a picture that is a real picture, and obviously there's a lot of negative, but there's a lot of positives that are going on out there, collectively in different, between the District Attorney's Office, the law enforcement, and at the hospital end. Now, Dr. Muse, you've been involved in a pretty innovative, training for the public with your Sports Smart. So on the positive side, how have you been able to have an impact with your program with the District Attorney and Sports Smart?
Sports Smart, it's quite frankly geared towards the athlete. We go out and talk to the schools, and we many times have a captivated audience, because through MIA regulations they have to hear about concussion. So parents and the athletes have to come to that. I wish it were for all the students, and the enlightenment of East Bridgewater High School, they had us come out and talk to the high school and middle school, to all the kids. But with this, we pair it up because both of us can give different sides to the same story, and we will use that avenue to get into the schools themselves and talk about this. Well before the MIA and the state decided that we should be talking about substance abuse, the Sports Smart program was already doing that. And the idea is to combine it, take something that they really love, genuinely don't want to lose, and that's the athletics, and show them how using these drugs can result in all that being thrown away and their lives being destroyed. So it's a message that I think they believe. I think you reach some kids. But quite frankly, the psyche of the athlete is also that I can do almost anything, so I'm certain that some don't buy into it. But the goal, I mean, I'm a realist here. I don't expect to go out and change everybody. However, for the kid who's already addicted, who's already gone down that pathway, who's already been given those oxys and now is on heroin, unfortunately his chances or her chances of getting off are very slim. So the only real hope we have to resolving this problem is changing the behaviors of how they're prescribed, and changing, more importantly, I like to say, emancipating the patient, letting them know they don't have to accept this, and teach them what the potential consequences are, and make sure that they know that they don't have to take the medications, that there are other avenues, and that if they do take them, yes, you could be the next addict.
You know, and it brings me back to Stephen with Peter's story. The district attorney talked about services and providing services to a family member. Was there a point where you as a family or you individually was looking for resources to help you, to help Peter, that, you know, if you could do it over again, is there something you wish you had for help to be able to help Peter?
Yeah, and so I'm going to answer that honestly. The answer is, you know, for us, no, we were a very private family. We were a family that people knew who we were. For many years, there was a shame associated with it. I think that, you know, a stigma that was associated with someone that was on heroin. And, you know, my brother was a politician in the city of Brockton, and he was doing, you know, whatever he was doing at the time. And my family, we're very private because over the years, we've had to be somewhat private. So we never reached out to anybody. We never looked for help for us, you know, to help my brother Peter, until it got to the point of absurdity, where we did. And my brother, you know, went to rehab. My father sent my brother to Father Martin's Ashley out in Maryland, I believe is where it is. And, you know, paid a fortune to have my brother rehabilitated. And so, you know, we did reach out at certain points in time. We were constantly trying to do it ourselves, which maybe in hindsight was a mistake. But the reality is this. Once, as Dr. Muse said, and I hate to say this, but it's I call a spade a spade. And once you're on this, you can forget it. There's very little that you're going to be able to do to get off of this drug. And you don't have to look any further than my brother and 2 small children to realize that, you know, when you make that decision, you've just got in bed with the devil.
And I can appreciate that statement, because I had an aunt that died at 52 years old. She's, you know, did not die from an overdose, but from years of abuse from substance uses, alcohol and drugs. You know, the one thing that I've been able to see through EB Hope is, and you know, I wish I could have helped, you know, the Marciano family, because we do see, you know, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I know it doesn't feel like that right now, and I know that there's some different programs going on throughout the county, you know, that are really new, because like you're saying, there's really nothing that, we've been building this from the ground up. What are some of the things that we're trying to do in the county, you know, District Attorney Cruz, that can change that stigma, that perception? Because I see that stigma all the time, trying to help people through EB Hope, where it's they feel shunned and like there's nowhere to turn.
Right. No, I think, and you do end up seeing that, and I think we're in a position, you know, what we began here in Plymouth County. Even though we have a lot of towns like EB Hope for East Bridgewater has a lot of different towns in our county, you know, 26 plus the city of Brockton, who all have various forms of coalition. So what myself and the sheriff and a lot of good people decided to do is, hey, what is the right answer? Because we don't have all the answers. We don't pretend to have all the answers. But let's all work together and let's make sure we're in a position where we're going to be able to
I want you to hold that thought, because we're going to take our last break here, and we're going to come back on some of the coalition work, some of the work in partnerships with the hospitals, and you know, finish up this wonderful episode. Thank you.
Honey, the credit fairy doesn't exist.
What?
It's make-believe. Nobody left anything under your pillow.
If there's no credit fairy, then we'll make our credit score go up.
We will, by doing things like pay paying our bills on time.
There's no magic to improving your credit, but there's help, and it's free. Go to creditfairy.org.
What?
Welcome back to our final segment here with this great panel as we try to talk to our community and have an impact and a positive impact on this opioid crisis. At District Attorney Cruz, we were just talking about some of the positive programs that are building, evolving. I know you chair a drug task force here in the county.
I do. I do with the sheriff, and we began it officially began it in May of 2015. But we've certainly been reaching out and talking to all the chiefs in our county since the ongoing epidemic, because we're also involved in a lot of the unattended deaths that occur in our county, and what we've seen, the increase over the years, especially the last 7-8 years, it's going in the wrong direction still. So what we decided to do is, because we were aware of the fact that there were so many coalitions, there were so many groups of people, concerned citizens, concerned parents, that said, well, what are we going to do about this? We don't know what to do. And they would get together, they would have meetings, they would reach out to our office to deal with our Director of Preventative Resources, and we put ourselves in a position of trying to work with them and help them. And we put together the Plymouth County Drug Abuse Task Force to try to make it really a place where you could get all sorts of information. And like I said, we didn't have that information. So therefore, how do you get that? You have to reach out to the community, and you have to reach out to the experts. I'm a law enforcement professional. So therefore, it was important for us to reach out to hospitals, medical professionals. It was important for us to reach out to legislators, faith-based groups, and also a lot of the groups that work in our community, the Learn to Cope, things like that. The programs that are out there, they're trying to help the families, trying to help them get the resources that they need, as we have an absolute crisis of lack of beds in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts right now. And what are we going to do about trying to get in front of that? How do we have to develop an approach of one-stop shopping? Where do you go to get information? How can we set up our own coalition? How can we apply for grants? How do we become a drug-free community? How can we get money and resources into our community so we can put ourselves with our best foot forward to help the people who live in our community? How do we make sure we have trainings? And that's what we've been able to do with the Drug Abuse Task Force, working with the local coalitions. We've had educator trainings. We're in Bridgewater State University. Last spring, we dealt with more than 300 educators from across Plymouth County showed up at Bridgewater State University, and we brought in experts who talked about, not from just Massachusetts, from around the country. How do we bring people in to get the best information? How do we get information like EB Hope, which was really, for now but prior Chief Cowan here in East Bridgewater, developing the program that really now is the model for a lot of the coalitions. How do we work with Chief Boteri down in Plymouth, who also has that next step where the police show up the next day and give information? That's where Stephen's talking about the trauma that comes with that. Bringing information to the families about, we know that your son, your brother, your loved one overdosed, and maybe fatally or not. But if it's not, here's information. Here's where you can go. Here's who you can call. People appreciate that. They need that help, and they need to understand right now that there should not be a stigma to it anymore. It is too perverse in our community.